Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for joining our session today. Glad to have you with us. My name is Russell Herbert, account manager here at Acromat, and I'm joined today by my fellow account manager and colleague Barrett Kapler, and also Courtney Symington, who heads up customer service for us at Acromat. So appreciate you joining. Looking forward to an engaging session today. As most of our regular attendees would know, we normally do these webinars a little differently with a presentation or a training of some kind, but we decided to change things up a little today. We have a lot of questions come in through our webinars and then also after the webinars as well as feedback. So we decided to take the time today to just answer some of those most pressing questions that you have around anti-fatigue mats. So we have a handful of questions that have already been submitted as we've prepared for this webinar. So thank you if you're one of those to submit a question. So we're going to start off by going through some of those questions that we already have. And then as we go, feel free to put your questions in the Q&A, because once we get through some of these ones we already have, we're going to have time at the end to address anything that might be current with you right now. So go ahead and ask away. No question is a bad question. Feel free to throw it in there and we'll address as many as we can at the end.
So our second question that was pre-submitted was, what can we do when we've purchased a mat and 6 months later the layout changes? We designed a mat to fit, but now we need it to be about 8 feet longer.
Yeah, and that's a common question we get with a lot of companies changing their layouts. They want to know if they have the ability to add on or take away any matting if they need to. So there's a couple of solutions we can do. One, you can send the mat right back to us and we can fix it up just how you need, adding any more matting, adding bevels on those as well. Or we can send you that piece of matting and we can also send a repair kit, which is what we would use here to bond the mat together. So you can just do it right on site for yourself as well. A couple different solutions.
I think that's good because we're all pretty well familiar with the that benefit of a modular tile, that you're able to actually reconfigure a work area down the road. Obviously, there's some drawbacks with modular tiles and the fact they don't stay together very well. Whereas this is a solution that kind of gives you that flexibility that, yes, you can change layouts without having to reinvest in an entire new mat. You can just get the piece that you need and modify it back to exactly that shape. So that's good.
Yeah, or even with if the area has angles in it, something you can't really do with the tiles, we're able to get that added on as well if you need that.
Yeah, exactly right.
Our third question we have is, how do we keep our mats from moving and sliding, especially in our more dusty areas?
So for that, the mat itself is made from a nitrile material, which naturally doesn't slide around as easily as maybe a PVC foam would. But it also comes back to making a custom fitting mat, maybe around the legs of the cutout or around the machine. So you can just kind of fit it in there. It won't slide as much because it's got stuff kind of holding it in place. But then we also have a non-slip backing that we can apply here, which will help just kind of keep it in place and not sliding it all on the floor. Kind of big thing with that is just making sure the area is clean before you put the mat down. That way you get the best stick. And then kind of a third option would be using a industrial tape, a Mighty Line tape is the company that we're able to provide as well, which you can just apply around the border so that it holds it in place. And you also get that yellow.
That's good. And we just had some feedback recently, didn't we, from somebody that's trialing the grip coat. They did a great job of cleaning the area when they put that down. And they said, yeah, the mat's not going to move. So there's definitely ways to accomplish that and get around the issue of the sliding. And I'm sure if you've been on one of our sessions before, you've heard me say that a lot of the safety issues with matting is solved with a mat that's the right size and the right shape. And that goes for the sliding issue too. So it's good.
Our fourth question is, we've gone back and forth between feeling like we need large custom mats versus a number of smaller rectangular mats. Is custom always ideal, or are there situations where standard shapes work best?
Yeah, that's good. Good question. And Part of this comes back to that first question we had about the roll mats, but I think a lot of the thought process behind this is that if I just get some standard sizes and put them together, it's going to save me cost. That's not the case with the Acromat product, so we want to keep that in mind. And every situation is different. Every facility and every work area is unique. So there's not really a just a one-shot answer to this question. We would recommend a site assessment of some kind, go out and take a look at the area and figure out what's happening in that work area, and that'll help you, that'll guide you to the answer of that question, whether you do need a couple of standard mats for stationary work areas or a bigger custom one if there's a lot of travel happening in that particular area. One thing that we always recommend too, whilst you're doing that, is make sure you assess it with an operator present, and just observe the travel of that operator and how they're working in that area. You may go there, when the shift isn't running, and have an idea of how this mat needs to lay out. You come back and observe when an operator is in that area, you may see something slightly different. They may travel over one side to a control panel or a pallet of product or something every now and again that you hadn't kind of figured into that first assessment. So there's some thoughts on that. And I also always say too, if a 3x5 is the right mat for that work area, then it's the right mat for the area. There's no need to go custom there, but it's just all about what is going to be the safest approach for that particular workstation.
So our fifth question, our operators keep asking for better ergo mats, and we know we need them, but we have an extremely limited budget for safety products like this. How can we justify the cost? And is there any data to back up how mats help?
That's good. There's a lot involved in that question. I think a lot of content in that one question, really. So I'll just address a couple of thoughts that I had about this particular question. The first part of it is about an extremely limited budget, and we understand that that's not uncommon. Everyone's on a budget, and the budget's not really the question that goes for us, as well as any other mat manufacturers. I would think that it's not really about how much you have in the budget. It's about when you are able to spend something on a mat, making sure that it's the right mat for the application, and you're investing in a mat that's going to last over time. So we've had we have a case study. It's available on our website. One of our clients a year or so ago, Winnebago, did a big project where they replaced all their ergo mats. They're able to save over the course of a couple of years $150,000. So it is about the budget, but it's more about the right mat for the investment that you're going to make when you are able to. We also had on other end of the scale a smaller client that only had $1,000 to spend a month, and we're still able to work with them on that budget to get in some high quality mats that are going to last for 3 to 8 years as they go forward, avoiding those costly replacements down the road. So a lot of ways to do that. Justifying the cost, certainly think about the investment, the longevity. How long is this going to last over time? Another example came to mind of a client 3 years ago that replaced all their ergo mats with a high quality mat, and they haven't had to replace any. So it really does save cost over time. Those mats are still in place and performing in a high traffic manufacturing environment to this day, and that was 3 years ago when they actually invested in those. As far as the science and data to back it up, we've got some content. There's also some other studies out there as well about this, but certainly important that you're protecting your people with an ergo mat that's going to prevent some of those long-term MSDs and other type of injuries that could come from just working on cement. So that's a few thoughts I had on that. I don't know if you've got.
No, I mean, you pretty much hit the nail on the head. I was gonna kind of emphasize how there's been a large focus on preventing the MSD injuries, and the matting definitely helps a lot with that in the facility.
That's good.
We have a question in the chat here from Brian. He's asking, do the benefits of anti-fatigue mats outweigh the risks if the operator moves within the work cell rather than standing in one spot? What would a better option be?
Sounds like kind of more of a custom mat is what they need that really covers the whole cell that they're traveling in.
That's a good question. I think that's exactly right. That this question is more about if an operator is on and off a mat, maybe that would certainly present a risk, especially if you've got some kind of overlapping happening or a gap in between two mats where the operator is on and off. So we would certainly recommend designing a mat to fit that whole area so they don't have to get on and off of that mat during their work time. And then you're eliminating all potential risk then, both from, the MSD part of it, where you're providing them a safe ergo mat to work on. And you're also eliminating the trip and fall risk of having to get on and off a mat.
Well, probably be kind of coming back to watching where they're walking within the cell so you can cover, mainly just that area.
Exactly right. Didn't you have a recent example of somebody who had a standard mat, but they were on and off to a control panel and actually did cause a trip?
Yeah, where it could have just been a little bit longer, kind of more of a custom shape and just right up to the control panel instead of, I wasn't sure exactly how many times a day they're going back and forth, but obviously the chances just go up the more and more they're doing it. So just to prevent that risk, just kind of extending the mat to fit that whole walk path that they're going back and forth.
And as it's a square foot rate, you're only adding a few square feet to go out to that control panel. It's not like doubling or tripling the cost. It's just adding a few square feet that's really preventing a lot of risk.
Yeah, and it outweighs the cost of a potential injury.
Exactly. Yeah, it's good. Thank you for that question.
Well, another one from Brian. He had asked, is there a way to know how soft or rigid a mat is based off advertising? Is there a rating for them?
That's a great question, Brian. One that we do get a bit is about, the compression and that type of thing. I'm not aware that there's a rating or a gauge that kind of puts everything on the same level playing field. There's a lot of differences with ergo mats, from thicknesses as well as the material and the construction. I'm not aware that there is a standard range to compare everything against. We would recommend doing a full sample or a trial program. That was one question that I think we had come in before. We didn't get to that one yet, but offering a sample solution, there's multiple types of samples that are, smaller pieces like this that you can look and feel, and that's helpful. But actually taking an area in your facility, we just did one for a client last week, where there's a big area that they wanted to test a mat at, and we actually invested in that ourselves as a way for the client to get the feedback from the operators and test that in use. Every operator is slightly different too, so it's important to get their feedback on it as well. I don't know if you've got any thoughts around that question.
Just, I guess, in terms of a nitrile rubber is probably going to be a little bit more cushiony, softer than some other materials out there. So I guess looking at what the exact material is that the mat is made out of could give you a better idea on that. But kind of going back to what you were saying, there really is no definitive number out there that can kind of quantify that.
Another question we get fairly often: what are the benefits of matting over insoles?
Well, that's a good question. I always say that the two things have their place. There's always areas that are maybe impractical or unsafe to have a mat, where an insole may be a better solution. Yet there's always areas where standing work is performed for the majority of the time that a mat is a better solution. So I don't think it's really about one versus the other. It's about which one is better suited for the application at hand. We had a client that was actually pulling vehicles through an area. Well, clearly you can't really have a mat where there's vehicle traffic. It's just not going to work well. So in that case, an insole might be a better solution. Same with somebody in a warehouse that's doing a lot of moving and picking parts and they're not in one spot. Yet the operator who's at a cell or a workstation for most of their shift, a mat's a better solution in those areas. It provides more anti-fatigue support than you can ever put inside your shoes. And also, as you know, you may get turnover, you may get different people moving different shifts and things like that. The mat is going to stay there for the life of the mat, and provide that support for whoever comes and goes in that area. So,
and I think going back to Brian's initial question, that first one we had about if the mat would be right for the area at all. If it's a very large area, maybe it would be best to just use the insoles. Might just be more cost effective for them, depending on the size of the
exactly,
area.
yeah. If there's a reason that you couldn't mat the whole area, then an insole is gonna do something more than nothing. So anything's better than standing on cement.
Yeah.
This next question has a couple parts to it. It's a bit longer. When requesting a quote, what number are we potentially seeing? Understandably, you have standard sizes and custom sizes, but the prices seem to differ between 2 4x4 mats, depending on the label of custom or standard, by as much as $100 for the same purchase. Could you shed some light on this?
Yeah, I think if I'm understanding that right, so we do have a standard range of mat part numbers, which is everything from up to 5 feet wide and up to 75 feet long in 1 foot increments. That's considered a standard size for us. And then we have the custom part number, which is for anything non-standard. So it might be a non-standard rectangle or runner, or it may be actually a custom shape. So there are two different things that we're talking about here. The standards have their own set pricing for each of the sizes that are listed within that standard range. And then the custom has its own rate per square foot that doesn't change regardless of how custom, complicated, whatever you're doing. It all falls within that custom part number. I don't know if that is answering all of that question. Was there anything I missed there? Or?
No, that's answering the question. The next question we have is, I tell the builders not to use chairs on the mats. They're asking why I tell them that. Is it bad for chairs to be on the mats? If yes, why?
That's another interesting one. Appreciate that question. Chairs and mats are kind of an interesting discussion, aren't they, Barrett? Something we probably get asked about most weeks, I would think. And it's something that, as far as the mat itself, is probably not going to damage the mat. I mean, there's certainly some mats that will get damaged because of a chair, divots, or maybe even rips and nicks and tears and things like that.
Like a stool too, with a more kind of sharp leg.
Yeah, especially if it's not moving.
Yeah.
But mostly it comes back to the safety. Put two things like that together, you can have some safety concerns, like somebody tries to get on the chair and it binds up on something on the mat, and you could have an accident that way. So most of the safety leaders that we talk to prefer not to combine the two things, because it just adds an extra risk that you don't want to take. So there's a couple of ways to address it. Do you need chairs and mats in the same area? And try and separate them out. Maybe if there's sitting areas compared to standing areas, that's a pretty straightforward one. Sometimes a smaller mat that you can actually move in and out when you transition from sitting to standing is an option. We've even seen, if you look on our gallery on the website, we've actually designed mats that have cutouts for chairs, so that you have the mat in one spot and a space for a chair to live within the mat itself. So there's different ways to do it. I just kind of leave the decision on whether you're comfortable with that is up to the safety leader. If that's something that is okay within their environment, every environment's different. So that would be a decision the safety leader would need to make, and then we would accommodate however that needs to be designed.
And it's more of an issue that might not seem like it's causing something, a problem at first, but over time is really when you start to see the effects of having the chairs on the mats.
Exactly, yeah.
So another question we have here is, we know we need mats, but we don't have the time to get a program in place or even begin to assess each space. Do you have a step-by-step process or a place to begin?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I like that one. Do you want
Yes.
to kick off with some thoughts?
So with that, we are able to come out on site at no additional cost and do a site assessment for you. So if it's something that you don't really seem to have the time for, if you can just take an hour out of your day, maybe one day, to walk around with us through the facility, we can kind of take the measurements and get all that for you. And kind of present it to you in a quote, or however we need to do afterwards.
Yeah, that's good. And we did have, not sure if it was the last webinar or one before, but we've gone through a step-by-step process of how to create a standard work instruction for your facility. And it takes a little bit to get set up. And like Barrett says, we're here to help with that process every step of the way. Once it's set, you don't really have to spend time on assessing or evaluating ergo mats anymore. It's something that covers your whole facility. And it doesn't matter if you're adding machinery, changing a layout, if you're just updating something, or if you're just replacing a worn mat, it can all be covered within a standard. So you don't have to rethink it every single time that you're coming up with those questions. And then as you bring people into the organization that are involved in these projects, it's kind of a playbook that they can work to as well. So it really is a huge time saver once you get that set. So it's a great question.
Another question we have here is, what is the best way to handle curling borders?
That sounds like a Barrett question. He's the curling border guru.
Yeah, yeah, so kind of making sure the mat is made from a nitrile rubber material, which is completely chemical, oil, and coolant resistant. So you don't have the typical issue with, like you see here, this is a mat made from a PVC on the bottom. And what tends to be the case is once the oil gets kind of absorbed into this bottom padding, it starts to shrink and cause this border to start to curl up, which is already just kind of a flimsy piece, which this is the waterfall design where it just kind of falls over the padding. So that's when it has that waterfall design, that tends to be the biggest issue. They always tend to kind of curl up. So there's kind of a different approach we took with our yellow border. You'll see here, it's kind of got a thicker base and completely flush with the ground. And it's that nitrile rubber. So if it does start to curl, it just has that kind of natural springiness to go back to where it was. So a lot of it's within the design of the mat as well.
Called the bacon effect, isn't it?
The bacon effect, yeah.
We'll save the bacon for breakfast. How about that? Instead of having them on our ergo mats. So we believe in cutting the bevel into the material itself rather than having a two-piece construction. So as Barrett just demonstrated, in fact, we include that as part of our warranty. It's included in our 2-year full replacement warranty that we guarantee that the bevels won't curl up on the edges. So that's just something to look out for as well. Check the warranty on the mats that you're getting, discuss it with the manufacturer, because it is a big issue that can make a huge difference.
Another common question we get, but this one is, what is your lead time and do you offer free samples?
10 business days guaranteed.
Yeah, on anything, standard or a custom size. And then with that, we definitely do the free samples. We do a whole kit here, which you get kind of a box like you see here, and that would be full of these 12-inch by 12-inch samples of each of our material and the different variations. So you can kind of give it a full test. You can stand on it. You can put any kind of chemicals on it and kind of see the responsiveness of the material.
And as I mentioned earlier, we just recently did a pretty large one that we invest in for the sample program. So if you're a new prospect that hasn't tested an Acromat product before and you'd like to give it a try, we can get you a full-size sample, even if it's custom, that is no obligation, it's yours, And we feel that that's a really important part of testing out any ergo mat, is that you don't rely just on the little squares or pieces that you get to make a decision. You actually put one in use, let the operators use it for a couple of months. And then you can really make an informed decision to know if it's going to do what you're trying to achieve. So
And that's what I was gonna say, we can talk about it all day, but really the operators who are standing on the mats are the true test. So if you can get it, underneath them and have them kind of try it out, that'll obviously give you the best feedback that you need. So that's what we're happy to help you with.
that's exactly right. And the feedback and comments from the operators is always good and appreciated. And they really appreciate the fact that you're letting them test something before making a decision kind of up in the office somewhere about this is the way it's got to be. So it's good.
All right, we
Do you have
just
more questions?
got one more if we have time.
Yeah, that's good. Let's do it.
Yeah, so Connor's asking, do you have a recommended cleaning procedure for your mats?
We do. That's a great question, Connor. We had a webinar on that a number of months ago about the cleaning procedures. We do have a standard cleaning guide that we can share as well. And often what we suggest is that they'll fit in well with any cleaning procedures you have in place now. So it could be, that might be different for a food industry compared to a regular industrial manufacturing facility, but they'll fit in well with any cleaning process you have in place for that particular area. And our standard cleaning guide should set you on the way with that. You have any thoughts?
And the nitrile rubber, so pretty resistant to most chemicals. So your common cleaning chemicals are just fine to use with them.
Yeah, and we have some people that just sweep them, and some people who are actually pressure washing them or sanitizing them on a regular basis as well. So a lot of options with the cleaning depending on your need. It's good. Well, thank you for those questions. We appreciate everybody's time today. I think we're right about time to wrap it up. So if there's any questions we didn't get to that you still have, feel free to send them in. We're only a phone call away, email away, and we'd be glad to address those as well.